That's actually a very good question, and it's a question that I frequently get on my search logs as I look through the visitors who come to evangelismcoach.org. One of the critical questions that they ask most often is, what do I do as a greeter? Well, I can imagine a scenario something like this. The recruiter or the greeter coordinator makes an appeal for volunteers, perhaps as a Sunday announcement or perhaps as a personal appeal or maybe a phone call that there's a need for greeters this particular weekend. And I can imagine that you've agreed to volunteer, whether that's with enthusiasm or whether that is to simply do so to fill in the mix or to fill in the gap. Either way, you've now volunteered to be a greeter, and this may be your very first Sunday. And based on the search logs, what I see is people come to the website because they're not quite sure what to do. They're not quite sure, a first-time greeter is not quite sure what they're supposed to wear, what they're supposed to say, or even what they are supposed to do. And part of that is because a lot of churches do not offer regular training with regards to first-time greeters or regular training for their greeter ministry. What would I say is the most important practice of a new greeter? Actually, I would say that it has nothing to do with greeting at all, but it is preparing yourself in prayer, spending time praying for your church, praying for the hospitality ministries of your church, praying for your pastor, praying that the people who come to your church, whether they are members or visitors, would experience the presence of God. Spending time praying that those who don't yet know Christ that come to your church on Sunday morning would encounter the sacred presence of God and move forward in their journey to Jesus. You can also pray for yourself as a greeter, that the Lord would empower you to welcome those who come into your midst, that the Lord would empower you to engage them in conversation. You can pray that the Lord would use you in some small way in order to be able to make an impact in the life of the people who come to your church. That's a great question. What would the 4 most important actions of a greeter be? I think the first one would be to smile. To smile at the people who come into the church, to smile at the people who approach you at the Welcome Center or the Information Center, to smile at the people as you pass the peace during the middle of your service, if you do that, or even a smile at people you just don't even know. A smile communicates a lot of relational warmth. Now, the second most important action for a greeter would actually be fresh breath. It may seem a little bit obvious, but I think a lot of times we forget of what an impression a bad odor makes. In fact, one of the commentators on my blog once wrote that the word of life should not be met with the breath of death. Now, you can solve that in a variety of different means. You can make some mints available at your greeter station, individually wrapped, of course. Some people may choose to have some chewing gum, although a lot of churches would frown on chewing gum. The reality is that as a greeter, you want to do a quick check to make sure that your breath is fresh. The third thing that I would recommend for greeters would be eye contact. As people come in the door, or as people approach you at the information table, or as you meet with people during the service or after the service, eye contact says a lot. It communicates a level of relational warmth, much like a smile does. But I think a lot of us remember that there are times where greeters don't even look us at the eye, don't even look us in the eye, and that communicates a lack of welcome. And finally, the fourth thing that I would recommend for a greeter is to take the initiative and meet somebody you don't know. And if there are people that you don't know who they are and they're visiting your church, take the initiative to greet them, particularly after the service. Actually, I think next to what does a greeter do, the second most popular question that brings people to the website is, what do I say to church visitors? Most of the churches that read my website, are under 250 members or less. And in that size group, if you've been as part of the church for a while, you kind of are able to recognize who are the first-time visitors. And here are some things that you don't want to say. And I'll tell you from personal experience, you do not want to ask, is this your first time here? I remember I was new to a congregation and I had only been there for maybe 4 or 5 months. I introduced myself to someone that I hadn't met before, and I actually asked them, is this your first time here? And they very quickly informed me, with a scowl and perhaps an intensity of voice they didn't mean to communicate, that no, they are a long-term member, they've just been away for 6 months. So what can you say? Well, here's what I say. Hi, I'm Chris, I haven't met you yet. Others might take a little bit less formal approach and say, welcome to our church this morning, we're glad you're here. If you've got some small kids, let me tell you what we do for our child care. You can say things like, welcome to our church this morning. You can introduce people to your pastor. There's all sorts of things that you can possibly do. There's no magic formula to welcoming the first time visitor who is in your midst. You know, actually, in a lot of churches, once the service gets started, the greeters finish their task for the day. I would actually encourage you as a greeter to go the extra mile. Studies have shown that visitors think that your congregation is friendly, or they evaluate a congregational's friendliness within the first 10 minutes after the service is over. If you are a greeter, this would be a great time right after the service is over to take the initiative and once again greet people that you do not yet know. You might greet a first-time visitor. If you know that they're a first-time visitor, go ahead and take that initiative. Greet them, welcome them, perhaps introduce them to the pastor, visit with them for just a little bit, because this is the time where people would experience the friendliness of your congregation. You know, before they've come into your church, they're looking for where to sit, they're looking for how do you navigate the building, they're looking for what to do with their children. They're very task-oriented when visitors first arrive, but once the service is over, they have a chance to evaluate the friendliness of a congregation. So if you're a greeter, I would encourage you to take that extra step and go that extra mile to greet the first-time visitors after the service is over. Actually, I think this is a question that a lot of greeters think about, or maybe wonder, but don't really want to ask. You know, the role of a greeter is one small piece of the entire hospitality system. It is one feature among many in the visitor experience of your church. By itself, the experience that you may have of just 2 to 3 seconds with a visitor that particular morning may not seem like a whole bunch, but taken in the context of the hospitality experience of the entire Sunday morning service, your role as a greeter plays a critical part in that. You may not feel like you're a significant part, but you play one small part in the giant picture of the hospitality system of a congregation. Yeah, actually, I've got a couple more videos that I've made, and I'll keep adding to the mix. But if you go to churchgreetertraining.com, look for the free videos, and you'll start receiving by email links to several different videos that I've made with regards to the training of greeters.